Just as we were moving to Queensland, he got a job offer for 6 weeks in Sydney. So we moved up there. He moved back to Sydney, moved in with my mother. 2 people who really didn't like me. The 6 weeks turned to 10 to 12, 3 months. He would ring me only to abuse me over the phone. An apprehended violence order was taken out on him for verbal abuse by the police. And that was placed on him, and he was very angry about it. In the court case for the apprehended violence order, there was no evidence given because the judge said his dissertation up front was verbal abuse. After the AVO hearing, I was just shattered. I had listened to my husband publicly abuse me for 20 minutes. And I knew it was over. And that's when I went to a solicitor. During the time in Queensland, all his pay slips and all the bills were coming to me in the post. And I started noticing all these flowers and dinners on these bills. And I rang my mum to ask her if he was bringing flowers home to her and taking her out. And she said, no, I'm not. And he also was claiming he was working on weekends, but there were no pay slips coming through for the weekends. So I guess in my heart I knew something was going on, but I really was in denial. I didn't want to admit that anything was happening. Eventually, I received a photo of him having dinner with a lady that was sent with a letter from a girlfriend saying he was in an affair with her. I didn't want to believe it. I guess I was more in denial. I was in denial. So it made me feel, I defended him. I said in my mind that he has to have some social life while down there. So I wouldn't accept what was happening. When I did accept it was one day when I had a solicitor send him a letter saying, your wife is concerned that she thinks the marriage is over and we need to hear back from you. A day or two later after that was sent, I was in Woolies trying to buy nappies and food and all the rest of that, and all the credit cards bounced. And I was told to go to the bank, and I went to the bank manager who told me that he had cancelled my access to all our accounts. And that's when I knew it was over. I had chosen that I didn't want to live in Queensland well and truly before he came up, because my support system was in Sydney. I was lonely, I wasn't happy with the schools, and I had grown up in Sydney and had a large group of friends there. So I applied to go to various universities and got into Sydney University, so I arranged to move to Sydney. He had moved to Queensland in about August, September that year of 1996. 1996 he moved to Queensland when we were already in divorce proceedings, already working with solicitors. And he wouldn't talk to me. He told me, we went out for one dinner, and then he said at the end of the evening, because I said, well, this was great, we need to do it again. He said, until I'm back in my own bed, I will not talk to you again. And never has directly. The other thing, and that came to my mind as we're saying that, is in those months in Queensland, I refused to give him unsupervised access. And what I meant by supervised access is would go down to the beach with the kids' bikes, and he would ride for miles away with the kids on bikes and come back, and I would have his car keys. So it was time alone for a few hours, but I could still see them in the distance. During that time, he went to my child had learning difficulties, and he went to the counsellor who was helping with the learning difficulties. And the solicitor had told me that I have to give unsupervised access, so I arranged a meeting with him. I organised it. As I walked out from this appointment to make unsupervised access, I got a call from the solicitor saying, "Don't let him near the children without you there," and didn't know. And it took until it was in the courtroom for me to learn that a counsellor he had gone and visited, he had made point blank that he wanted to get the kids and leave to go to America. The court proceedings really started in 1997. After I'd moved to Sydney, he came down for a visit. I was still worried that he would leave, so I had an order made that he could have the kids, but he wasn't to take them out of Sydney and they were to be returned. And he was served with those papers when he arrived down here. We went ahead with a final hearing that was in December 1997. It was made by mutual agreement where the kids were left with me and he had access. He was still living in Queensland, so he had access during most of the holidays, and any time he came to Sydney I would work with him so that he could see the kids. And it went quite well until he moved back to Sydney. He then moved in with my brother, who was still, even as an adult, totally dependent on his mum. So it was like moving back with my mum. It started again. I mean, we went through 3 to 4 final hearings, so I always wondered when final was final, and a couple appeals. And progressively, over time, they gave him total custody of the children, with access to me only if the children wanted it. A court case is devastating any time, and to be standing in the witness box for days on end for the crime of loving your children is just outrageous. I mean, it's outrageous from a personal point of view because, of course, both parents love that child. But it's outrageous from the society's point of view because of the costs involved, for the courts, for all the administration behind it. Why do they have to find out anything at all about that the parent loves the child? The court hearings dragged on, both with the children. Finally, I lost all contact with them in 2002. And I kept on fighting. I kept on not believing that a mother who'd done nothing wrong but care for her children, acknowledge and help their learning difficulties. I couldn't understand as a teacher all these things that we felt was the right thing, I was held irresponsible for. I was told that giving Ritalin to my child was poison, and I was ordered by the courts to stop it, which prevented him from really reaching his potential. Financially, I came into the marriage with all the money. With my professional jobs, I had a home fully paid off on the very wealthy lower North Shore of Sydney that I had bought completely myself, paid off. I had a retirement fund that I had opened voluntarily, and I'd had to close that off because the laws in those days stated that you couldn't, when living overseas, have a retirement fund in Australia. So that went into family assets. When I met my husband and married him, he was managing a marina, owned several sales boats, had had a construction company in the past, spoke up as if he was very financially able. But when we actually married and I looked at the accounts, he was in debt. He had no savings. The only assets he had were his boats. And he was spending more than he could afford. So with my income from renting my house in Sydney and my assets and shares there, I was paying off his debts. I was paying for all the expenses of having a child. And when it came to buying a home and getting a home, my parents loaned us the money for the deposit because they knew I had it. And he didn't want to return it. He was furious when I sold one of the sailboats and returned the loan to my parents. Yeah, he did lots of yelling that day. Through all of this court case, everything I got was given to him. Everything. We're talking of millions. We're talking of shares. Okay, I spent a lot on the account, on legal bills. But what did it matter? Because he was just going to push it in the courts or give it to him, so I may as well fight for my children, fight for them to get to safety, to a good environment to live in. I stood there once and looked in the mirror at myself and said, okay, I've got a choice to make today. I've got a choice to decide, do I want to keep money for my own future or welfare? Or will I fight with everything I have in the correct legal process to try to get them back? I wanted to believe the courts would do the right thing. So I chose that I would fight. And so with what I paid in legal fees and what I gave to my ex-husband, and legal fees, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. I never added it all up because I don't want to. I just had to go forward. So I walked out in 2004 when the final hearing came, where they said everything has gone to him. The children, the money, the whole lot. Enough fighting. I was left with my Toyota Corolla, and my dog, and a few household items and my photo album.